urban legend, or I guess it would be maritime legend, tells the story of a battleship that was steering without navigation. All they had is a radio. And the captain saw a bright light ahead. And they were on collision course with this bright light. So the captain has his staff get on the radio, send a message ahead to the light. He said, I am the captain of this ship. I demand that you alter course 20 degrees. And the response came back, said, I'm sorry, we cannot do that. You'll need to alter your course. Well, the captain was outraged. He gets on the radio again and he says, listen, I am the captain of this ship. You need to change your course. We're on a collision course with you, and I demand that you change your course. The response came back, said, sir, I'm just a lowly, I'm a signed up guy. All I'm saying is we can't, and again, the captain interrupts him. Sir, you will change your course because I'm the captain of the battleship. The response comes back, says, well, Captain, I'm a lighthouse, so you decide. We live in a dark world. We live in a world that tells us that we need to either light our own way or that we need to change our course. A world that tells us that what we want to offer, that what we want to show the world is not what they want to hear. At the same time, when we try to shine we talked about that this morning, when we try to shine our light into the world, sometimes the world doesn't want to hear that. The world says that, no, I don't want to hear your perspective of how I should live my life. And all we want to do is just like that lighthouse, we want to shine a light in a way that we can offer hope and we can offer help to the world around us. We want to guide people into safety, even though sometimes they don't want to hear it. This morning, like I said, we talked about being salt and we talked about being light. Tonight, I want us to kind of follow up with that. I want us to talk about what that light is specifically that we shine. Maybe we should have even talked about this first, but too late now. Here we are. As we look at this idea, I want you to turn to Mark chapter 5. And we're going to look at this scene in Mark chapter 5. And what I think it's good for us to be reminded once in a while that the light that we shine into the world is Jesus. It isn't us. It's not about us. It's about shining Jesus into the world. That's John chapter 1. That's John chapter 1 verse 4, that Jesus was the light of the world. The world didn't want to see it. That's what John begins his gospel with. But we have to believe that light can change the world. We have to believe that. But we also have to understand the world isn't always going to want to see that light. The world might not like what we have to say all the time, but because of what He has done for us, that we'll make the decision to shine His light anyway. So let's jump into this scene here in Mark chapter 5. First 5 verses. It says, they came to the other side of the sea, Jesus and his apostles, to the region of the Gerasenes. As soon as he got out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out of the tombs and met him. He lived in the tombs, and no one was able to restrain him anymore, not even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but had torn the chains apart and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountain, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. So first thing I want us to see is a world without Jesus, a world without the light of Jesus is indeed a dark place. Jesus pulls up on this coast, pulls up in this area, and the first thing we see is he's encountered, or he is confronted by a man possessed with a demon. Now, this is a man whose life has been totally controlled by this evil. Now, it doesn't say specifically, but we know that the source of evil is Satan. So this is in some way, this is Satan's responsibility. So this is a man who has roamed through the tombs. He's a man who has cut himself. He's a man who has apparently attacked other people. He screams at the night, a just generally unpleasant situation for him and for everybody else. But this man is powerless to change his own problem. He's powerless to change his own situation, rather. He can't fix his problem, or I'm sure he would have at this point in his life. Now, we don't know how this happened, and honestly, I don't know how the whole idea of demon possession in Jesus' day worked. I'll be honest with you, I don't get that. It did. God allowed that to happen. We don't know what happened with this guy, how he got in this situation. But we do know that everybody in the area knew about it. Because it said he wouldn't be shackled anymore, which means they had tried that. The people had tried to bind him. They'd tried to shackle him. They'd moved him off into the mountains. He was being handled like in the way that we try and handle a lot of problems. It wasn't really to help this guy. It was to isolate him. It was to get him out of our hair. That's kind of the way we deal with problems sometimes. Let's just get him to where he's not bothering us right now. Let's get him away from us, make him just go away. But their solutions didn't work. They too were powerless to deal with this situation. Against this level, this type of evil, what we see from just this first glimpse is humanity, regular humans, had no power to deal with this. There was no way for them to overcome this. It shows us, though, that a world without Christ, no matter what action we take, no matter how much we try and solve things on our own, a world without Jesus, we're just not going to solve our own problems. We're not going to be able to come to the right decisions about how to fix the serious problems in our lives. Too many people around us try and solve their problems by, I'm going to figure this out on my own. I don't need you people. And you hear that way too often, right? People have struggles, even our brothers and sisters in the church, having a problem with their marriage, a problem with their family, a problem with their kids or whatever. And they isolate. They pull themselves away. And it's like that's the exact opposite thing. Come and let us help. Come and let God's word help. But what we see is without Jesus in the situation at this point, in Mark chapter 5, there's no way to solve the problem, right? There's no way that this is going to be fixed at this point. According to worldometers.info, there are 26 million abortions every year. Yet there are thousands of children under the age of 5 abandoned every year. Marriages all around us fail. People are in blatant pursuit of money, fame, wealth, and yet are empty. Our nation, our world, but our nation in particular faces an epidemic now of depression and anxiety. 55 million people in America are on antidepressants. We have an opioid crisis. Over 100,000 people OD'd on opioids this past year. 56,000 people OD'd on fentanyl. We have problems. We have problems in our world. One look at any sort of news website, any news channel, crime, terror, whatever it is, we understand our world is a dark place, and our world leaders, our politicians, our government is powerless to help it. Because that's what happens. And listen, not all of those problems I just mentioned have the same root, but so many of those problems, the root is sin. It's what happens when people try to go without God in their lives. When people decide that we can make this on our own, we can solve our problem, we can deal with life without God in our lives. The world around us is a dark place. And we see too many people in despair. We see too many people trying to figure this out on their own. And we talked about this a little bit this morning too. We know the answer to this, right? We know what the world needs. What Isaiah says in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. He's making a prophecy about the Messiah. We know what that light is that the world needs, don't we? It's Jesus. It's Jesus. We have to believe that. We have to believe that Jesus can make a difference in the world around us. Because the world without Christ, the world that has chosen to separate themselves from God, is powerless. Powerless to fix the problems that plague our society. So the world desperately needs this light that Jesus is. And though it is a challenge for us to deal, for us to shine that light, it's a challenge to get that light into our culture. What we also have to believe is that the light of Jesus can overcome darkness. Let's start in verse 6 now. Verses 6 through 13, when he saw Jesus, this demon-possessed man, when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and knelt down before him, and he cried out with a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you before God, don't torment me." For he had an unclean spirit. "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." "What is your name?" he asked him. "My name is Legion," he answered him, "because we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send him out of the region. A large herd of pigs was there, feeding on a hillside. The demons begged him, "Send us to the pigs so that we may enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. The herd of about 2,000 rushed down the steep bank and into the sea and drowned there. So when Jesus gets off the boat, this is interesting to me. When Jesus gets off the boat, this possessed man came to him. It makes me think of a couple of questions. Number one, how did he know Jesus was coming? How is he that ready for Jesus? I mean, this guy's up in the mountain screaming and cutting himself with rock, but when Jesus shows up, he knows it's Jesus. And number two, what was his purpose? Why did he do it? Okay, so first of all, let me just mention this. Wouldn't you love to see this scene? I mean, I don't know how you see this. Maybe it's 80s scary movies. Every time I read this, I have a scary voice for this guy when he says, "My name is Legion," or whatever he said. I mean, he's got some. I always see this. I always hear the scary. But this is a bizarre scene, right? Jesus pulls up on the shore, and here comes this demon-possessed man. That tells us a couple things we need to remember. Yes, Jesus will overcome, but we need to remember a couple things. Number one, Satan and his minions, Satan and his angels are intelligent. Satan has the ability to organize. Satan is smart. We've been done a great disservice by armored deviled ham. You've got to be my age or older, I think, to know what that means. Satan is not the little guy that's a cartoon character with a pitchfork and a ponytail. The cartoons have done that to us. Ads have done. That is not who Satan is. We need to remember that Satan is crafty. In fact, Peter says Satan is what? A roaring lion. That is not a cute little cartoon character. A roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. That's why Paul says in 2 Corinthians 2:11 that we're to live as people who are not ignorant of his schemes. Satan is smart. And we also see that also tells us that Satan is always working to oppose where Jesus is working in the world. Why did this demon-possessed man come? What he's basically saying, it seems like he's saying this is our territory. Because if he wanted just to avoid Jesus, he could have just ran to the other side of the island or what. He could have just gone away. But he confronts Jesus. And he says, "What have you to do with us?" He's saying, what are you doing here? This is our area. So this shows us not only is Satan smart, but he's always going to be working to oppose the things that Jesus wants to see happen. And when we see this situation, if we're going to fast forward a little bit, we look at this and we see what happens to Jesus in particular. We can sometimes get the feeling that evil always wins. Because if you jump ahead, this demon-possessed man, the demon's objective was to get Jesus to leave. The people of the town eventually will ask Jesus to leave. And what does Jesus do? He leaves. So in some ways, yes, the demon comes out of the man, but Jesus leaves this area. So you even look at this and you think maybe Satan sees this just for a moment as kind of a victory. Now, what we're seeing here, I guess I've already ruined it, told you the guy gets the demon out of him. But before we jump to that, this is a battle of good versus evil. This is light versus dark. This is a classic battle. And Jesus stands, and the guy says, "What have you to do with us?" And he says, our name is Legion. This man doesn't have one demon. A legion is a group in the Roman army that's either somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000. So the great theological battle over the years has always been, how many demons did this man have? Did he have 1,000? Did he have 5,000? Well, I'll tell you, I've worked this out. I'll tell you the answer. It does not matter. It doesn't matter how many demons this guy had, because Jesus wins. Doesn't matter if this man had 10,000, 5 million demons. Jesus still wins. And Jesus stands in front of this guy, and this is what we have to see here. is that, yes, it says our name is Legion. There's some power there, apparently. But even when Jesus cast the demons out, they have to ask permission where to go. And Jesus wins with just a simple statement. Jesus says, get out in verse 8. And they're gone. And they even have to ask permission to where they can go from there. We have to remember that Jesus wins. That no matter what the world tells us, Jesus will win. Paul tells us in Philippians chapter 2, verses 10 and 11, that every knee will bow. That light will overcome darkness. That good will overcome evil. It may not happen the way we expect it to happen. It may not happen in the time frame that we hope it happens even. But every knee will bow before Jesus. Our world is full of people who have made a name for themselves by denying who Jesus is, by denying things about the Bible, by denying everything about who God is and what creation is. So these guys, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, there's several others you could name. These guys, every knee will bow. These guys who doubt the existence of God, they will find out. And I don't say that in a way that makes me happy. But they'll find out. Because every knee will bow before Jesus. Joe Biden will bow before Jesus. Donald Trump will bow before Jesus. Our politicians, our bosses, our employees, our employers will all bow before Jesus. But we also have to remember that He has power. Jesus also has power over the very things that we struggle with. Our temptations will bow to Jesus if we take them to Him. Our struggles, our obstacles will bow before Jesus if we just take those things to Him. Every knee will bow. Everything on earth will give in to the authority of Jesus. So you want to overcome the things in your life. You want to overcome the enemies. You want to overcome the challenges that confront you in your life. John has the answer. In 1 John 5:5, it says, who is it that overcomes the world? You want to win? You want to be on the winning side? Here's how you do it. Believe in Jesus, the Son of God. But we also have to remember, what does John mean when he says believe? Did this demon believe? He says, who are you, Son of the Most High God? He knows who Jesus is. But when John talks about belief, he means trust and obey. That's the great hymn that we sing. So when we think of this idea, the one that overcomes the world is the one that is all in with Jesus. That's how we know that the darkness around us can be not by our strength, but can be overcome by the strength that is in Jesus Christ. So Jesus, with a, I won't even say a sentence, he just says, get out to these demons. And these demons disappear. They ask for permission where to go. He sends them into these pigs. And then the whole town comes down and grabs Jesus. And they carry him around town on their shoulders. There's confetti flying everywhere. There's a marching band. That's not what happens, and you know it. Because what we see next is that sometimes people just hate the light. Sometimes people don't want light to come in. Look what happens here in verse 14 and verse 17. Maybe I should see it. Verse 14, the men who tended them, the pigs, ran off and reported it in the town and the countryside, and the people went to see what happened. They came to Jesus and saw that the man who had been demon-possessed sitting there, dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told them about the pigs. Then they began to beg him to leave their region. This doesn't make any sense. What Jesus has just done for these people, He has made their homes, their neighborhoods, their community, their children safer. I don't know where you grew up, but maybe when you were a kid, there was some place that, when I was a kid, I'll just tell you this. In Perry, Oklahoma, we could get on our bikes and we could ride all over town. But at 3:30, we had to be back on 8th Street, my street, because at 4 o'clock was shift change at Ditch Witch. You know Ditch Witch. Huge corporation in Perry, Oklahoma. It was the manufacturing facility for Ditch Witch, which was really kind of cool. But we had to be out, we had to be back on our street because it just wasn't safe because of the Ditch Witch traffic in Perry, Oklahoma. But we knew you have to get away from that area because it just wasn't safe for kids to be on bikes. Where this man lives, this is the unsafe area because there's this crazy man up there cutting himself and screaming and yelling, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Jesus just took all that away. He just made everything okay. There should be rainbows and butterflies and should be a Disney movie. You know, it should be a perfect scene. But that's not how the people react. It says they were afraid and they begged him to leave. Why is that? And maybe this is supposition, but it seems like Jesus just messed up their status quo. Okay, yeah, there's a crazy guy that lives up in the mountains. We get that, but we know that. This guy just came in with a word, changed everything. What's he going to change next? We don't like change. We don't like change, especially when it means it might change my life. It might demand that I do something different with the way that I live my life. They had been frightened before because of the behavior of this man, but now they're frightened because what if Jesus wants to change me? I'm not ready for that. When I was in college at Oklahoma State, my freshman year, all through high school, all through my senior year at least, my plan was to go. My roommate was going to be my best friend, Kirk. We had it all planned out, and then because we were both kind of idiots, he got in trouble that we should have both been in trouble, but he got in trouble and couldn't come the first semester. So first semester I had to get another roommate, and I ended up having 2 or 3 different roommates, and it was such a weird thing. I couldn't wait for second semester because then Kirk was going to come be my roommate, my best buddy. Well, he comes second semester, and one thing I had forgotten about Kirk is that he was a far better student than I was. He actually went to class and everything else. And he had this 7:30 metallurgy class. I, to this day, have no idea what metallurgy even is. But he's an engineer now, I'll just tell you that. He had this 7:30 metallurgy class that was right across the parking lot. So he could get up like at 7:22 and be out the door and across the parking lot to the whatever the metallurgy building, whatever that was. But here's what he'd do. And my best friend at the time, I was so excited to have him there. But he'd get up like in the middle of the night, like at 7:15 in the morning. And he'd turn on the light. And because he's trying to get ready and he's trying to hurry. And this is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. He'd turn on the light and he'd leave. And he'd leave the light on. I've got like 4 hours of sleep still at that point. But I was like, Kirk, turn the light off. And after about 2 weeks of this, I was like, I got to get a new roommate. This was the worst decision ever. But it made me uncomfortable. Number one, it made me uncomfortable because I didn't want the light on. But it also made me uncomfortable because he was getting up and doing what he's supposed to be doing. And I didn't like that light shining on me because I knew I should be getting out of bed too. But we don't like that. And that's where these people seem to be. Don't just turn the light off. I don't want to see that right now. Jesus' light is burning very brightly to these people. He just cast out this demon that they had no solution for, and he's gone. And their response is, shut the light off. Let's just get rid of the bright light. The simple lesson to learn here is that when we shine that bright light of Jesus in some places, people aren't going to be comfortable with it. We talked about that with salt this morning too, right? Sometimes when we shine that bright light, people are going to cover their eyes, people are going to cover everything, and they're not going to, and that's okay to a degree. We have to just understand they're not ready. And we have to be okay with that. That doesn't mean we shine any less brightly. That doesn't mean that we turn Jesus down. We just go shine somewhere else because that's what Jesus does. The fact that people don't always want to hear makes it a little challenging for us. But we have to know and we have to believe, like this man surely in that quick came to believe, that Jesus, the light of Jesus, can change lives. Look at verses 15 through 18 again. We just read these, but let's look at this again. verse 15, they came to Jesus, saw the man who had been demon-possessed. He was sitting there dressed and in his right mind. They were afraid. Those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs. And they began to beg him to leave their region. Verse 18, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him earnestly that he might remain with him. Look at the change in this guy in just these few verses. The man was insane. I mean, he's cutting himself with rocks, screaming in the mountains. Now he's making travel arrangements. You know, he's wanting to leave with Jesus. He's a menace to society. Now he's dressed and in his right mind. It says that he's stabilized. He was hopeless. Now he's alive and he's ready to do something. He's ready to connect to Jesus. Now the people are just frightened by the power that they've seen Jesus display, not frightened by this man because he's fine now. I'm not sure that we would ever witness a faster transformation than what happened to this man. I mean, this blows Cinderella away. I mean, this guy goes from literally a nutcase to a guy who's, I want to go with Jesus. I'm ready to go. This is a humongous transformation. Listen, we have to understand, and not just understand, we have to believe this. That Jesus, when Jesus impacts our lives, He doesn't just shift the trajectory of our lives. Jesus doesn't just make a difference in our lives. Jesus doesn't just improve the quality. Jesus makes us different. Jesus should change us completely. That's what Paul's talking about in 2 Corinthians 5:17. If anyone's in Christ, a new creation has come. The old's gone. That's this idea. That's why our ladies, for the ladies retreat, have this topic of transform. I'm guessing it's going to be based around this idea that we're a totally new thing. When we come into contact with Jesus, and listen, let me tell you this: if this isn't describing you, you might need to look a little deeper. I mean, because this kind of goes back to the salt and light from this morning. You've got to be different completely, because that's what He says. If you're in Christ, you're a brand new thing. Like this man who was just nuts, who was demon possessed, screaming and in chains and all kinds of crazy. Now he's asking to go travel with Jesus. The Bible is full of people who are completely transformed by God's power. I mean, you think of Moses. Moses, who had a life experience well up to this point, but then stands before a burning bush that's speaking to him, and then he says, you know what, pick somebody else. But then when he lets God take over his life, he leads a nation out of Egypt. You think of Rahab. When we think of Rahab, I think of Rahab the harlot. But look who she is. That's who she was. She ends up in the genealogy of Jesus. You look at the apostles, fishermen, tax collector, end up being guys who change the world. Maybe no better example than Saul of Tarsus, who becomes the apostle Paul. Stands, it almost seems like as the authority over the murder of Christians. Then becomes the guy who says, I am the chief of sinners. Because that's what Jesus does, and we have to believe that. Because we're not going to let that light shine if we don't believe this is true. We're not going to try and convince, we're not going to do, in fact, what Paul will say, we'll look at this in a minute, what Paul will say earlier in 2 Corinthians 5:11 is that we beg people, that we try to persuade men, because we believe this to be true. I don't know, I have to believe that also is some of your stories. I don't know every one of your background stories, but there has to be some of us who were something before Jesus changed their lives and are now what you are now. Those are the stories we have to tell people. That we believe that Jesus can change us from a madman in the rocks to somebody who's ready to travel with Jesus. And that's really where the story takes a great twist. Because like this man, when we realize how much Jesus has done for us, the next step is that we have to then become the ones who shine that light. Look what happens next. This is really, like I said, this to me is the big plot twist. The man says, verse 18, he begged him earnestly that he might remain with him. Now, what we would expect here is for Jesus to say, come and I'll make you fishers of men, or something along those lines. I mean, that to say, yes, come with me. It's time for us to go. Let's make this journey and you can come be my follower. Listen, verse 19, Jesus did not let him, but told him, go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So he went out and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. We would expect Jesus to say, yeah, come with me, but that wasn't the intent. Jesus says, no, now that you've seen what I can do for you, go back and tell those people who just ran me out of town. You talk about a challenging thing to do. I mean, it would have been easier probably for this man to just hop in the boat and go with Jesus, because his history where he is terrible. Get me out of here. Let me go wherever you're going. I don't care where it is, because it's got to be better than how I'm perceived here. But Jesus says, no. I need you to stay here and tell people how I've changed your life. That's gigantic. That's 4 things I want to point out there, and then we'll wrap this up. Number 1, we don't have to be trained before we tell people about what Jesus has done for us. And this is a person who went through preacher training school. I'm pursuing a degree now through a Christian college. But we don't have to have preacher training school or Christian college to be somebody who can tell somebody what Jesus has done for you. Somebody should have amen to that. I'll say it again. You don't have to have a great education to tell people what Jesus has done for you. Amen. Thank you. I don't know why I haven't done that before. But we tend to see what we would think is this guy would come to one of us, come to me and say, hey man, Jesus just changed my life. I really want to go tell everybody about it. I'd say, well, what you need to do is go to this school. You need to spend about 2 years. All those things have value. I don't hear me discrediting education. I believe in education, but it's not a necessity. It's not a prerequisite. Just tell people what Jesus has done for you. That's what he tells this man to do. Number 2, you don't have to have all the answers. This man did not know. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm gonna say this man knew nothing about Revelation. You know why? Because it hadn't been written yet. But this man probably didn't know anything about Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel. He probably didn't know anything about Daniel's visions. But Jesus said, go tell people what I have done for you. We use the excuse, I don't know what to say. What if somebody asked me? We use that excuse way too much, people. I'll just be honest with you. Because I do it myself. We don't have to have all the answers. Somebody asks you a question you don't know the answer to, just say, I don't know. I'll find somebody who knows. But we can't use the excuse, I don't know anymore. We've got to just tell people what Jesus has done for us. Number 3, you don't have to be successful. You don't have to have a great reputation. This guy literally 15 minutes ago was the scourge of his neighborhood. I mean, he was the guy they wanted to get rid of. Now Jesus says, now you go tell people what I've done for you. Too often, again, we hear people say, I want to establish my career before I get into telling people about Jesus. I want to do some mission work, but first I want to do this. First I want to establish this. I want to raise my... You don't have to be successful. Be successful as you go. That's the idea of going to all the world. As you go, pursue your career. As you raise your children, grow in your faith. And tell people, tell your kids, tell your grandkids, tell your neighbors what Jesus has done for you. And the next one, the 4th one, isn't a don't. It's just Jesus says go, not come. And this kind of is what I was saying this morning about the salt shaker. It's really great for us to be here together. It really is. I don't diminish that ever. And we should do it every chance we can. I'm talking to the Sunday night crowd, so that says something. But we have to go. We have to be people who are willing to go and engage our culture. Jesus gave this man, and I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but that is a humongous challenge he gave him. This man has a terrible reputation. People have avoided this man maybe his entire life, however long he's been possessed. He's been the worst outcast you can be, and that quick, Jesus says, go tell people what I did for you. Go. Sometimes our call is just to simply go. When we think about the change that happened in this man's life, and then the task that Jesus put in front of him. What I think applies to every single one of us is the fact that we have all, in some way, I hope this is true, and it should be true, we've all been changed by Jesus in some way. Maybe you grew up in the church. Maybe when you came to Christ, it was a simple act of obedience that you knew it was time. And that's great. That's a lot of our stories. But even at that, Jesus has changed you at some point. So it's all of our jobs to go and to tell people about the light that Jesus is in our lives. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, I mentioned just a minute ago. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 11. Paul says this, "Therefore, since we know the fear of the Lord, we try to persuade people. What we are is plain to God, and I hope it is also plain to your consciences." Then skip down to verse 20. Verse 17 was, "If anyone's in Christ, he is a new creation." Verse 20 says, "Therefore we are ambassadors for Christ. Since God is making his appeal through us, we plead on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. He made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God," so that we might become that light to the world, that we might reflect the light that is Jesus to the world around us. Some people hear this idea, and they think, that's really hard. And it is. It really is. It's a great big challenge. But I think sometimes people say there's too many people who haven't heard, too many people don't want to hear. The world wants to go their own way. The world wants to make us change course. And besides, what difference will one person make anyway? I'm the one Christian in my whole office building. I'm the one Christian in my whole school. What difference can one person make anyway? Well, the truth is, you're not one person to begin with. You've got the power of Jesus on your side. You've got an entire church family on your side. Yes, maybe in your specific hour-to-hour situation, you might be a little bit alone. But one person can make a huge difference. In this chapter, the people asked Jesus to leave. They literally run Jesus out of town. But what was the last thing Jesus told this man to do? Go tell everyone what I did for you. And what was the people's reaction? There, the last verse we read. People were amazed. Jesus comes back in Mark chapter 7 and 8, and there's 4,000 people ready to listen because of one guy. One person can make a difference when we decide we're going to let the light of Jesus shine through us. Maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you want to know more about what all this even means. Tonight, you have an opportunity to do that. You don't know if you'll have an opportunity any other time, but you do right now. If you want to just find out what it means to get into this relationship with God through Jesus Christ, let's talk about that. All we'll tell you is turn away from your life right now. Confess Jesus as your Lord. Be immersed in the waters of baptism. Come up and live that new creation. Just that simple. It's just that hard. Why are we going backwards? Whoa. Stay, boy. But maybe you're a Christian, and maybe you're at a point in your life where, like we talked about this morning, maybe you know your light's not shining very brightly. And you'd like the prayers of this church family, and to be reminded that you're not alone. You're not trying to do this alone. Let us help you in whatever way we can while we stand together and sing a song of invitation.